Okay, here goes. I don't actually know what I'm doing here. I just had my first full day back from being in the hospital for a couple days and couple nights for my 2-year-old. She's 27 months old, um, who had started a couple months ago having things happen that don't seem huge at first, but started to accumulate. Um, so at first, she was having like wet diapers that were getting fuller and fuller. She was getting more and more thirsty, getting more and more hungry, and it seemed kind of like maybe she was just having a growth spurt. And then those same things got worse. It was like the dial just got all the way turned up on all of them. So she was leaking through multiple diapers at night, soaking through pads and mattress protectors. And it wasn't yellow. Her urine was not yellow, not even a little bit. It was completely clear, like water. And her thirst was incessant. She couldn't stop drinking water. She just needed more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And she would eat and she would pick and she would eat and she would pick, but she also was like hangry. She had become very irritable, very easily aggravated, upset about things that would not normally upset her. Her affect totally changed and she was not herself. And at that point, that was the biggest red flag for me. And so it was on a weekend when I made the decision, like we need to talk to the doctor. So I messaged the doctor in the portal, and that very next morning, which was a Monday morning, she woke up soaked again, like 3:30 in the morning, all of that stuff. But then she threw up, and she was like in pain. She said she had a boo boo. She said she had a boo boo, and then she threw up. That was the sequence of events. And at first, I was like, well, maybe she ate. It was the day after Super Bowl, so I was like, well, maybe she ate something at the Super Bowl thing that we had last night at our house that like didn't agree with her stomach or something. Um, but either way, I was like, I need to take her to the doctor. So I called instead of waiting for them to reach back out to me. I called. They were also concerned. We got her in and they checked her ketones and they checked her blood sugars and they were very concerned. They told me to immediately take her to the Children's Hospital and specifically to their main campus because they would have the specialty care team that she would need. And I I'm not sure exactly how I felt in those moments. I went more so into let's take care of this mode. Um and also like my like have to be strong mom mode because my oldest daughter, my teenager, was with me, and so was the baby who was 10 months. Now, of course, he didn't know what was going on, but I didn't want my energy to be unsettling for them. I wanted it to feel safe and supportive for them and for my 2-year-old, of course, too. So start walking out of the doctor's office, texting my husband to let him know what's going on. And her regular doctor comes to me. We didn't see her regular doctor for that appointment. We just took the first available. But her regular doctor actively sought me out before I was leaving the office and came to me. And she said, I just heard, I want to come over, check, see how you are. Are you okay? And that made me realize even more like, okay, this is serious. This is something that, thank goodness we came to the doctors today. And that's what I told her. I was like, I'm just so glad that we came today. I'm glad that, if this is really what they think it is, that we are here and that we are going where we are going. Um, and so we get in the car. As soon as we get in the car, she throws up again, all over me, all over her car seat. And I don't have another change of clothes for either of us. So on the way to the hospital, I make a quick stop at Target. She's saying she's hungry. I don't even know if she can eat. But I'm like, if this is the last thing she can eat for a long time, like maybe I should just let her get something to eat. And so I go in and get her a change of clothes, and I get a shirt for me, and I grab a couple snacks and coffee because sleep was not a thing. And I leave Target. We go to the hospital, but we're far from the hospital. We're more than an hour away from the hospital's drive. And so my daughter, my teenager, she's 15, is sitting in the back in between the two babies, and she's nervous. You know, she's worried. She loves her babies. She like they're my babies, but she loves her baby siblings. And she's worried. And so she's likely Googling on her phone all of the things that could go wrong. And she starts trying to take the baby's heartbeat, take the 2-year-old. We specify the 2-year-old, not the 10-month-old. To take her heart rate. She said she learned how to do that in health class, but it just made her feel more worried because she's 2, so her heart rate is just naturally a little bit faster. But then she says, Mom, she's breathing weird. It seems like she's like panting. And so I'm looking at her and just keep checking her through my rearview mirror so I can drive safely and also make sure she's safe, and knowing that we still have a little ways ahead before we get there, and also trying to reassure my teenager. And thankfully the 10-month-old, the baby, like he fell asleep. So thankfully he's quiet and peaceful and not a worry in the world for him, thank goodness. But you know, in those moments, you just want to, you know, you can't control it all. Like I knew there was nothing more I could do besides get us to the hospital at that point. And so I did the best that I could do to get us there as quick as I could and safely. And we did. We got there. We got to the waiting room. We got to the ER. We got to the waiting room. When triage got to us, they also were very clear about their concern. They said they're going to put her on their priority list to get back as soon as possible. The hospital was like 99% full. It was a busy night at the hospital. But they did get us back. And they quickly had to get some IVs in her. She, at this point, she had not thrown up again, but she was not herself. She seems lethargic. She wasn't limpless, where like she couldn't hold her body up, but she was just almost overly tired. Now, mind you, she's been awake since 3:30 a.m. That's not true. She took a nap during the day before we went to the doctor's appointment. But still, she had woken up at 3:30 a.m. and also she threw up twice. And now what we're learning at this point at the hospital is that it didn't matter how much water she was drinking, her body was registering that it was dehydrated, which is why she kept wanting more water. But her body was not able to properly absorb it all and gain what it needed from that water. So her body was feeling dehydrated. So she was in an extremely dangerous position. They tested her ketones and her blood sugars there as well, which is how they knew that it was such an urgent situation. And they were great at the hospital. I had no idea what to expect. And my teenager, my 15-year-old, has a tendency to worst case scenario things. That's kind of where her anxiety levels go. And so it was helpful. My dad was able to come and pick her and the baby up and bring them home, because my husband was home with my other 2 babies, who aren't babies anymore, but they'll always be my babies. They're a little bit older, 10 and 7. Oh my gosh, he's not even 10 anymore. He's 11. 11 and 7. And it was a whirlwind, but also I felt and still feel just overwhelming gratitude for how everything happened, because it could have, these symptoms that she had could be kind of easy to brush off or to not think are that big of a deal. Bedwetting in a 2-year-old, you know? I mean, yes, it became incredibly excessive, but you know, there's extremes to everything. So I felt and feel so grateful that we went to the doctor when we did. We got to the hospital when we did. I don't know. I mean, there's no point in playing out scenarios that didn't happen, right? I think that the way it happened allowed us to help her sooner rather than later, which I think ultimately helped her long term overall and prevented the situation from being even worse than what it could have been. And even though that particular hospital, that main campus, is far away from where we live, I'm glad that we went there, because the team there was wonderful, despite not getting any sleep because she had to get around the clock care. And so I was debilitatingly exhausted, having not slept for like 40 plus hours straight over the course of these first few days. But oh gosh, type 1 diabetes has nothing to do with lifestyle. It is an autoimmune disorder where the pancreas, so autoimmune is when the body is fighting itself. So the pancreas, something happens that causes the pancreas to essentially begin to fight itself and kill off its ability to do what it needs to do to create insulin. And the body needs insulin in order to do what it needs to do to handle the food that we intake and get the energy where it needs to go in our bodies. And so without that, you cannot live. I did not know all of this. I did not know the intensity, the severity of type 1 diabetes. I had no idea. And why would I, right? Because I hadn't had a ton of exposure. I had worked with some individuals over the years when I did school social work and such that had very that had challenges with type 1 diabetes that I was assisting them with, and as far as resources and such like that. But up close and personal experience with type 1 diabetes I had not had. And for a 27-month-old to have that is scary. They're so little. She's so little. And she has to get pricked and prodded and poked and squeezed and like, you know. So we're home. We have a butt ton of needles and medications and just a bunch of medical supplies that we have. We have a very steep learning curve that we are working with working through in order to best help her, because this is forever. It's lifelong. And since she's little, it's, on us to make sure that it's done properly and with care. And that's hard for her to want to eat, but have to wait until we can test her blood sugar, to want certain foods and it not be the best time for that particular food. She's not back to herself yet. She's not her happy go lucky, cheery, really loves to laugh and make you laugh girl. That's who she is, and she's not back there yet. Like, she's not there yet. She is still tired and aggravated and irritated and angry. And gosh, who can blame her, right? Like, our body's still adjusting. We're still trying to figure out if the insulin levels that she's getting right now are the proper insulin levels for her. So, we have to monitor her a lot here at home. And she's one of 5. So this affects the whole household. It affects her siblings who love her so much and are worried about her. And she's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. Even if and when things aren't okay, we will again be okay. But it's a lot. And so it made me think about, what can I do for me? I am mom, right? So I need to and want to be there for them. And I will, and I am, and I do. I also know how incredibly important it is for me to be there for me so that I can be there for them, so that I can be who I want to be for everyone in my life, right? For all of the relationships in my life, but right now in particular, especially for them in this situation. And it just seems that every time, and this is the past 2 years since I've had the back-to-back babies, every time I try to get a routine up and running for me, which I had going super like smoothly and seamlessly for many years before I had my 4th, every time I try, I get it up and going, and then something happens that throws it off. One of the kids gets sick, or maybe there's a holiday that is coming up and that changes the schedule because they're off, or whatever the case is. Something comes up, or I get sick, or 2 years ago, almost exactly, I had to take my other daughter to the hospital because of chronic issues that she was having. A completely different situation, but there seems to be that happening. That is a pattern. And so I had gotten a YMCA membership so I could go to the gym, use the childcare hours that they have there, and be able to have some decompression time before I come back, get the kids. I was doing well with that for like a month, and then the whole household, one after one after one after one, had sickness, right? Just back to back, bloop, 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 bloop. And so that changed things. And then Christmas hit, and then came January, and then I started to gradually get back into the gym. And I've been doing that now for a couple weeks. And hospital. And she's going to need continual care and check-ins, and that change, it changes things. And I'm needing to constantly remind myself that just because something worked before doesn't mean it's going to work again, or at least not in the same way. And so I know that time for myself and care for myself is important, but the way that I had developed it before is not going to work now. Not only that, But what I am continuing to learn and be reminded of is that my time for myself right now in this season, and what it looks like to take care of myself right now in this season, is going to be variable. It's not going to be able to have quite the structure. Even if it's a different kind of structure, it's just not going to be able to have quite the amount of structure that it could have before. And I'll be able to have more structure around it again, but it's not going to happen now. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that I failed or that I'm doing something wrong. It doesn't mean I failed them. It doesn't mean I failed myself. It doesn't mean that. And I think that so often, I have placed that pressure upon myself to figure things out. And the goal of figuring it out is to execute effectively, properly, and then move on to the next. And logically and professionally, I am well aware that that's just not how life works all the time. But in the past, it has really worked for me many a times, most of the time. And so things work until they don't. And when they don't work anymore, practicing a level of acceptance, I'm constantly having to practice a level of acceptance of, this is where I'm at now, this is what I need now, and that it's okay to let go rather than trying to force or figure out or control or whatever the case is. So I don't start back where I started at the very beginning of all of this. I don't really know exactly what I am going to do here with this time in this vlog diary. I have an idea, but I also know that I can't pre-plan it all. I'm not in that season of my life right now. So I'm just going to see what happens. And I would like to do this each day for myself, because it helps me to have a safe outlet of expression, and also know that this video, by sharing it, it will find its way, or others will find its way to those who need it and will benefit from it the most. And that makes my heart fly. Like, that ignites my soul. That feels like the best way I can alchemize my experience and challenges and struggles and hardships or fears or pains or whatever we want to call them. I can be a part of alchemizing them for good. Kind of a way to pay it forward, while also being a form of self-medication and meditation for me. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. If anyone's even watching this, feel free to ask questions or comment below. Yeah, and I'm just gonna go for the ride. Not giving up my driver's seat, but also not trying to take the wheels of life completely. I still have choice in my life, even when things are out of control, right? Like, I can't control that my 2-year-old now has a lifelong autoimmune disorder that will always need to be managed, and she will always need insulin in order to live. I cannot control that. I cannot change that. But that does not mean that I don't have choice in my life. And that does not mean that she can't live a rich, fulfilling, meaningful life. I have so much faith and so much hope and so much gratitude. That's what keeps me anchored. And I guess part of my hope is that in making these videos, I can express my spectrum of emotions while also being able to share and show that faith and that hope and that gratitude that help me navigate it all. So maybe you'll let me know what you think.